This weekend, we are going to be reading together through the Sermon on the Mount. And if anyone was ever to put a word count or a word limit on how Christians should or ought to live, and they were to tell me, you have to pick something that's short and concise, and that's all you get, this is exactly what I would submit. It is essential. It is essential for us to read this and to learn it, to inhabit it, to live as faithful followers of Jesus. Now, this series of chapters 5 through 7, that we're going to be reading together Friday, Saturday, and Sunday this week, it's both good for us, but also bad for us. You see, it's good for us because we are living at the conclusion of the modern period in recent history, and we're so deeply influenced by Enlightenment thinking. And as a result, we want answers, right? Plain and simple. And we find them here. In chapter 5, Jesus says, "You have heard that, but I tell you this." In chapter 6, you might think that faithfulness and obedience to God looks like doing prayer and sacrifice and fasting in this kind of way. But Jesus says, try it like this instead. And then in chapter 7, before we get going too quickly and thinking that we're more righteous than other people, Jesus tells us to sit back and practice faithfulness ourselves and to let God play the role of God. Let God do his part. So this sermon is good for us, but it's also bad for us because as we read this sermon, we see just how far we still have to go. We begin to understand that in order to follow Jesus, it's going to cost us everything. That we have to give everything over to Jesus. This sermon asks much of us. And in fact, at one point, it even asks us for perfection, to live in perfect love with others as God perfectly loves all of creation. This sermon asks us to give everything we are. And so as we read this sermon together this weekend, it's my prayer, it's my hope that we as faithful followers of Jesus will lean into the words of Jesus found here. That we will give our lives in order to allow Christ to work in us and through us. And so that one day these words, these teachings, this sermon can describe us just as it described the life of Jesus. This weekend, I encourage you to keep up the great work. Read a chapter of Matthew every day. And we'll check back in again with you next week. But until then, allow these words of Jesus to fill you and to teach you how to become a faithful follower of Jesus.